Warm welcome to our foreign viewers, meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished viewers, a warm welcome to the Palace of Justice, to the midterm review of cyber trading. Unfortunately, State Minister Eisenreich has tripped by himself and still at the doctors, but he tries to join us as soon as possible. If this is not possible, the head of the Ministry of Justice will take over his statement. I hope you can understand the situation. I would like to welcome the head of the Ministry of Justice, Professor Frank Alvord, the Bamberg Chief Public Prosecutor, Wolfgang Gründler, and the Public Prosecutor as Group Leader, Dr. Nino Goldbeck. After the conference, you will have a chance to ask questions, get a footage and sound bites, and please turn to presse@stmj.bayern.de. Now the floor is to Mr. Gründler. Head of Office, Dr. Goldbeck, ladies and gentlemen. For many years, and this trend is unbroken, facts and figures of cybercrime in investigations by prosecutors and the police have continuously been growing in importance. On January the 1st, 2015, for this reason, the Bavarian Central Office for the Prosecution of Cybercrime was established and began work, combating professionally and globally acting criminal networks in collaboration with international partners is quite characteristic of the investigative effort and prosecution in the field of cybercrime. Our specialized public prosecutors, men and women, have right from the beginning not only dealt with the cybercrime offenses in the narrow term of the word, but also looked into criminal offenses where criminal technologies, advanced technologies, are actually misused for new phenomena of crime. The cyber trading offense, which is presented today, is a striking example, a striking case in point. In August 2018, the competence of the Bavarian Central Office for the Prosecution of Cybercrime was extended by the State Ministry of Justice to also include high-profile crimes of white-collar economic crimes. In early 2019, the task force set up for this very purpose decided to also focus on the international mass phenomenon of cyber trading, because actually this system has been existing for years, is exceptionally elaborate, the scanning system, and yields huge losses running into millions. Today, 3 years later, I can state that that decision at the time has panned out to be dead right, right as gold, as we put it in German. Why? The features and challenges characteristic of cybercrime are even more visible in the phenomenon of cyber trading offenses. The crime groups active and operating in this field are superbly networked, interconnected, operate simultaneously from various states, work on a very high technical level, and in an extremely professionalized manner. Investigators in Germany and abroad categorize the crime groups unanimously to organized crime. And despite this highly complex and dynamic structures of this criminal cyber trading industry, the public prosecutors of ZCB over the past few years have scored remarkable success in several investigative complexes in collaboration with the Bavarian police and numerous international partners. and also through persistent and painstaking investigations, not only in the form of arrests, but also by dismantling foreign call centers and seizing assets of crime worth millions. Our approach to, so to speak, beat the perpetrators at their own game has turned out to be appropriate. We, the investigators too, have to operate cross-border in an interconnected manner and on a very high technical level in order to spot international crime networks and ultimately initiate criminal proceedings against these criminals and punish them. I would like to thank very much both the State Minister and his head of office at this point for their continued backing. Thank you very much. The fight against cyber trading is exceedingly resource intensive. You and your ministry, and I'm fully aware of this fact that you and your ministry have always provided us with the necessary support. The fact that this in times of budget constraints is anything else but easy has always I have always been aware of that, and I'm therefore all the more happy as we can demonstrate that the funds employed have really paid off. I would also like to thank Dr. Goldbeck and his further colleagues who combat cyber trading day by day with an immense personal engagement and commitment, working across time zones, frequent assignments and missions abroad, sometimes even at short notice, or court trials between Memmingen and Aschaffenburg are quite a burden on you and your families and ask quite a lot of them. Without these role model engagements and commitments, frequently by putting their own needs on hold, you couldn't have scored that success. Of course, we don't deny or misjudge that cyber trading fraud is still a red-hot phenomenon. Every day throughout Europe, serious losses are incurred, and in the field of law enforcement, both national and international, there's certainly still a lot to be done. Nevertheless, this highly criminal business sector had to take a series of quite painful blows. And for this reason, we, the Bavarian Central Office for the Prosecution of Cybercrime, would like to make a mid-term review and outline what we have achieved in this field of offences since 2019. But rest assured that our work is nowhere near completed. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Chief Public Prosecutor. Now Dr. Nino Goldbeck is asked to speak. Professor Arlott, Ministerial Director, Chief Public Prosecutor Gründler. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity given to me to share a midterm review relating to cyber trading platforms and our outstanding work. What do we actually understand by the term cyber trading? Basically speaking, it's about mass phenomenon of professionally primed trading platforms on the internet that pretend that lucrative investment is possible with high yields. For the consumer, the situation is like this. It's banner advertising, professionally designed websites or platforms, virtual accounts with very detailed, colorful charts, And after a couple of months, this impression is gained that the investment is rewarding with major profits yielded. But in fact, everything is fake. After 3, 4, 5 months, the situation is a completely different one. The entire capital employed and invested is lost. Alleged fakes are just smoke and mirror, and there is a total loss on the part of the consumers. Now, just in brief, this phenomenon of cyber trading really has reached enormous dimensions, not only in 2021 or 2022, but we have been dealing with here in Germany, the law enforcement authorities in Germany for years, especially also within the states of Europe. The annual losses which we try to put in figures here. It's very difficult to come up with reliable estimates. Certainly run into billions year after year. And just imagine, it's not only German-speaking areas which are impacted and affected, but also others, especially popular languages like English and Spanish languages. And accordingly, there is a growing number of reports, not only in Bavaria or in Germany, but in many other states as well, reports to the law enforcement authorities and the police. As already mentioned by the Chief Public Prosecutor in 2019, we decided here in Bavaria to bundle everything at the Bavarian Central Office for the Prosecution of Cybercrime in Bamberg. We depend on close collaboration with the police, we, the public prosecutors, and we are connected and in close collaboration with all police officers to combat actually cyber trading fraud in extensive investigation complexes from north to south, east to west. They all deal with this phenomenon intensively. Now, after 3 years, what is the number of reports and complaints in Bavaria? We really see there is terrible damage caused. Of course, we can only talk about the reported losses, those we know at the authorities. And looking at them and looking at the number of reports pending, cases pending, so we have to assume that the total loss is 250 million euros. Only predominantly Bavarian cases. These cases are pending, and the range from 2017 to now. To date, and we very often have 4 or 5 digit numbers, and there are many private investigators who have suffered enormous losses. The biggest individual loss is about 5 million euros, 250 million euros in terms of reported cases. We know for sure that the unreported cases are even higher because for various reasons, a series of victims wouldn't even turn to the investigative authorities because they haven't even realized that they have fallen victim to scams. The 250 million euros can be subdivided more or less to various fraudulent trading forums in Bavaria. And the 250 million euros, can be split up to 4,500 identified and spotted victims. They're known by name. Day after day, new reports are received by police officers and public prosecutors. So what is actually the knowledge concerning the crime group? Ultimately, after 3 years of intensive investigations, You know, something came true. When we started in 2018, 2019 to deal with this phenomenon, we had a certain assumption, you know, and we thought that the crime groups work very professionally. They are actually organized international criminals, and this is what has turned out to be true. These crime groups are very splintered, work very professionally, to some extent even like a corporation. At all hierarchical levels, there is a numbers of perpetrators involved, at least dozens, if not hundreds of perpetrators, not only operating from one country, but frequently from several states at the same time. For example, in various states, let's say call centers are operated at the same time, like in Bulgaria, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia and Georgia, as was the case in one investigation complex. We also have to state, after 3 years, that this phenomenon of cyber trading fraud in some states is even an industry of its own standing, a highly profitable business sector in countries like Israel, Albania, Ukraine, and so on. This area has reached a scope that we can really refer to it as, and have to refer to it as, an industry of its own standing. And through this meticulous and persistent investigations in collaboration with the police, we have achieved quite some success. Let's be honest, this was anything else but taken for granted. I mean, that sort of advance. We weren't sure at the beginning whether or not such success could be scored, but we did score great success in early 2020 after successful investigations, including localization, spotting call centers abroad. Actions were planned and started. The first action was in April 2020, just a few weeks after the pandemic restrictions were installed. And in Serbia and Bulgaria, especially in collaboration with Austrian investigative authorities, a large number of call centers and companies were searched and raided on. And in Sofia and Belgrade, in particular, large number of people were arrested. That was the first action. At the end of 2020, in another complex, investigative complex with another grouping or crime group in Bulgaria, for example, active in Bulgaria, we had a very successful action in Ukraine with a very intensive collaboration with the Kiev Chief Public Prosecutor's Office. Many rooms were searched, assets of crimes running into millions were seized. In 2021, even sort of in a rhythm of 3 months, again, new crime groups were spotted using the same modus operandi in their scams. In 2021, there was an action in Kosovo, also involving national authorities with a high number of arrests. Several call centers of various crime groups were searched in July 2021, in July and October 2021 in Bulgaria, again in Georgia, and I would like to go into more detail as far as the latter cases are concerned. And just a few weeks ago, in March 2021, there was also a police action in collaboration with the specialist, the public prosecutor in Tirana, in Albania. So this was just an outline, where major actions were completed. In addition, we have further numbers of investigative proceedings and prosecutions, perhaps not quite as big as that, as the ones I mentioned. As a first example, the Action Day in October 2021 in Israel and in Georgia. Just the one day. And with the great support of the investigative authorities from Israel and Georgia. Now, the focus was on a crime group that we have already observed and investigated and looked into for quite some time. The entire management or leadership, senior leadership, was spotted, and call centers abroad were spotted, and there were arrests of a series of people. Now, these crime groups are certainly responsible for a total loss in Germany in the two-digit million range. Meanwhile, various perpetrators arrested are detained in Germany, waiting for their court cases. And as so often in this field, it is very difficult to draw a clear line between fraudulent platforms to be allocated to certain crime groups and, those which are also operated by other crime groups. Really many successful trading platforms have a criminal background. The second example I would like to outline was the Action Day last year in July in Bulgaria. Now, that before, of course, we had all sorts of technical investigations, very meticulous ones and painstaking investigations. The call center in Sofia could be spotted as a result of that meticulous work. And also in collaboration with Bulgarian forces, we could then stage the Action Day, including 4 arrests. The situation and the external circumstances in the call centers on site suggested quite clearly that we were dead right. For example, there were graffitis on the walls or clearly criminal and unambiguous instructions on site. So these crime groups that put their focus on the German-speaking area after a certain time, these groups are also in charge of losses running into millions. Victims, had losses up to 18 million euros, and day after day, further complaints are filed and further cases are reported. Now, the arrests were mainly conducted in Bulgaria. That is to say, this crime group had another office, so to speak, in Israel. And something which is quite typical of this crime group is that very nice names were used, to get a serious, to convey a serious impression. Capital Group, financial groups, Geneva financial groups. So you can actually see how certain brands are chosen selectively because you want to come across as a decent company, and they use the names, similar names of decent companies, so that you can confuse the names. As you can take from my talk, and as already mentioned by the Chief Public Prosecutor, collaboration with the foreign states is pivotal and key in our work, to our work. And in Bavaria and Germany, of course, we need more collaboration, good collaboration, of course, and we depend on collaboration with the authorities abroad. After 3 years, we can now say each country, each state in the EU had to be asked for legal remedy, and the same applies to many other states outside the European Union. In individual investigation cases, traces cover some 20-25 states. So in one investigation complex, all these states have to be contacted for legal aid, for legal remedy, for legal help. The cooperation and collaboration with other states, of course, is just through the conventional lines within the European Union, which is possible, of course, and a little bit easier within the European Union. But in the past time, we have increasingly banked on another tool, namely that one which is provided by Eurojust, the formation or establishment of joint investigation teams. And this makes it possible to crack down on the close network of these crime groups and react adequately by also collaborating closely with our international partners. We have, in 5 investigation complexes, we have formed such teams. And it is our target to promote and encourage international investigation, deconflict them, align them, coordinate them, and exchange or facilitate the exchange of findings and evidence, depending on the states concerned in the investigation complex. Of course, there are always members of this certain states. Investigative group can consist of Poland, Bulgaria, and other countries. Other complexes only focus on collaboration with Austrian law enforcement authorities. Now let's talk about the specific facts and figures of the past 3 years. As I've already said, we succeeded in arresting many people, both in Germany and abroad, and all in all, 80 people were arrested due to investigative proceedings pending at the ZZB in Bamberg. In Germany, 3 people could be arrested or were arrested. Some 40 of these arrests were on the basis of original arrest warrants, which we brought about in Bavaria. And the arrests usually, were or took place in their countries, very often through their investigative efforts. And some couple of people were extradited to Bavaria or transferred to Bavaria. In some countries, just an example, Serbia, the situation is like that their own citizens won't be extradited. So in these cases, the suspects will have to face legal proceedings in their home states. All people extradited are male between 23 and 61 years. And within the framework of our international collaboration and our activities, we can say that our collaboration and search efforts are very successful. Further people could be arrested in Italy, Slovenia, Poland, Greece, and other countries. The arrests, that's one thing. The next step, after concluding the investigative proceedings, the person has to face up legal proceedings. Are there convictions? Yes, there are. The first conviction handed down on the basis of our efforts was handed down in December 2020. The Regional Court of Coburg convicted the suspect and sentenced them to a total prison term of 4 years since 2020 and up to date. Further convictions in various investigation complexes have been added, always for commercial and gang fraud, and the punishments were usually between 2 and 6 years, 10 months. The highest sentence, 6 years and 10 months, was handed down in January 2022 through the Regional Court Munich 1, the white-collar crime department. An Israeli suspect from the higher management level was sentenced to this prison. And due to our statewide competence, we can actually file actions in all courts, and various courts have dealt with cyber trading proceedings. All 10 convictions are final, are binding, and further complaints have been filed, and the next court proceedings will be in store. Of course, the perpetrators should be punished in line with their crimes. This is a pivotal element of our investigations. On the other hand, of course, we're also trying to recover one way or the other the assets of crime and proceeds of crime. There are major hurdles, actually, major challenges we have to face up to, namely skimming the profits, criminal profits abroad. Why? Because the perpetrators are well poised in this context. They use very complex international money laundering systems and schemes. They're very difficult anyway to spot, and investigators really work very hard on that. Cryptocurrencies to be mentioned, for example. So the profits, criminal profits, are concealed even more. And whenever we are asked, what is our advice to victims, please don't have too high hopes. The money's lost. We can't promise if you can recover them, but nevertheless, we have succeeded in various investigation complexes in recovering such funds, both in Germany and and abroad. In one complex, more than 3 million euros could be recovered in German accounts. In collaboration with the Kiev public prosecutor, assets of crime running into millions were seized, also including several luxury cars. So the effort is really painstaking and very massive, and we have to take on this effort. But we always check, is it rewarding? If we can say yes, if the effort pays off, we do everything. Just as in October 2021, for example, and I'm talking about the transport of a Lamborghini and a Rolls-Royce from Kiev to Bavaria by plane. Now, asset recovery is not a toothless tiger, and with the appropriate effort, you can score great success. Now, if I can dare an outlook, perhaps, will the financial supervisors and consumer protection agencies say that this form of investment fraud through fake crypto or trading platforms is booming and poses the biggest threat for investors? So actually, this is a judgment which we share, to be careful. Anyway, this is a great danger, this scheme, and we still put our focus on it. But education is very important for private prosecutors, who have to take a very close look at their investment possibilities. And if there is a loss incurred and you landed on a fraudulent platform, then of course ZZB will do everything to beat the perpetrators at their own game, especially through interlinked investigation on a very high technical level. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Goldbeck. Thank you very much for your in-depth information. State Minister Eisenreich will join us in a minute, so I would like to thank the office head for chipping in, as it were. Thank you very much. I mean, we could bridge the time. Should you have any questions, we're happy to fill them. We've got the specialist with us, Dr. Goldbeck. Mr. Schneider from AZ. Mr. Schneider, excuse me. Use the microphone at the back so that the viewers on the stream can also follow your questions, and that the interpreter has a chance to interpret your questions. Just a follow-up question. How many court cases at the Munich 1 and 2 regional courses are pending? Well, I can't respond for sure, but I think at the regional courts Munich 1 and 2, there are 2 more cases pending here on site. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions on site? If this is not the case, the viewers on the stream also have a chance to ask their question to presse.stmj.bavaria.de. Thank you very much. Please use the microphone. München, DPA. I have a question to Mr. Gründler. I just wanted to ask you, because you thought that the fight is resource intensive. What was the budget volume? How much money have you spent in the past 3 years? Well, it's less about the resource of money, but the resource of humans, human capital. How many public prosecutors can deal with this subject matter, and the establishment of ZZB with their 18 public prosecutors was an important step because it's personnel intensive, of course. This work, the field of offense of cybercrime, you know, we have 8 staff members, of course, working at the ZKI, also fighting child pornography and sexual abuse on the internet. But the others actually deal with these cases, with cybertrading cases, because it's personnel intensive. And we try to compensate that, of course, by involving as many people as possible. Nominally speaking, it's 5 people, but the others are helping out from other departments. Otherwise, we couldn't do our work properly. Thank you very much to DPA for its question. Oh, there is another question. Yes. Thank you very much. Well, Augsburg Allgemeine. Well, you are reporting 80 arrests, 23 suspects were extradited. The convictions don't sound that high, actually. Why? What is the reason that the other cases did not end up in convictions? An investigation proceeding is not finished by arresting a person. And with some time delay, transferred from abroad to Germany, of course, investigations are ongoing, cross-examining or examining the suspect. Many other things have to be looked into to arrive at a point when we can say now a court action will be filed. And of course, there is this acceleration principle in detainment matters. Takes some time, of course. The next point is that it depends on the workload of the court involved as to when the actual trial can take place. There are few actions in stores and complaints already reported. So there will be further court trials. Just to exclude any misunderstanding, the alternative would be arresting the people and then investigating, and then perhaps they are probably not guilty. No, this hasn't been the case yet. So there is just one question from the Straubing Tagblatt, a question to Dr. Goldbeck by Mr. Müller. Are there any serious offers in this category? How can I distinguish between decent and fraudulent offers on the internet? Certainly, there are decent providers in this highly speculative investment area, but it's just natural. We, the investigative authorities, only have contact with fraudulent criminal platforms and offers. That's why I cannot give you a list of positive things saying that these providers are doubtlessly reliable or trustworthy and decent, but there are various hints and indications by BaFin in Bonn, for example, the regulatory authority, that these offers have to be looked into. What kind of platform is it? What is the target of investment? Who is the operator of the platform? How high are the alleged returns promised? Or on the internet, for example, are there perhaps negative judgments of these portals? Then you have to be even more careful than normal. And a very important message which we've always been trying to send out is, please don't get mistaken. Sometimes you have contact with people who are fluent in German. Don't get mistaken by people, whose call numbers, let's say, prefix from Frankfurt or Zurich even. So don't get mistaken, and don't get mistaken by the fact that, once you have invested at the beginning, there are perhaps smaller payout amounts. This is all part and parcel of this scam, and on a technical level, this is easy to realize, and leads to the fact that many people in Bavaria and in Germany just trust these people and invest even more. So continuous care is really necessary. Once you have taken this step and decided to invest in highly speculative instruments, financial instruments for private investment. Thank you very much, Dr. Goldbeck. I may assume that the State Minister will join us in a minute. Just a press indication, the presentation will be made available both in English and German language versions, and the original conference can be recorded and will be recorded as well. Should you not have any questions, especially the viewers at home on the stream, you have press at stmj.bayern.de to turn to. Are there any questions here in the room? This seems not to be the case. So we should reckon with the arrival of the minister any minute. Microphone, please. Well, we've heard more and more that cryptocurrencies which are not decent can lead to problems as well. Is that part and parcel of your investigation? And how big is the danger that people invest in cryptocurrencies and they lose money because you can't pay with them? Yes. Thank you very much. We have to distinguish a little bit. There is this phenomenon as well as a sort of special form of fraud, investment in non-existing cryptocurrencies. This is not what we understand by cyber trading, but of course cryptocurrencies play a role in cyber trading, and that's just another variation from cyber trading corners, you know, and there's certainly part and parcel of our investigations. Thank you very much, Dr. Goldbeck. We would like to welcome the Bavarian State Minister of Justice, Georg Eisenreich. Thank you very much. State Minister, we have already fielded a few questions of questions asked. Well, Public Prosecutor Gründler, Public Prosecutor as Group Leader Dr. Goldbeck. Grüß Gott on my part. As you have heard, I tripped by myself and I strained my ankle and it's swollen, so I couldn't walk anymore. So I saw my doctor. But I've made it. So for 6 years, for 6 months, I've got to use crutches and we'll be having a few problems. But I'm happy to join you because, after all, this issue is very, very important. You have heard the number of losses, the amount of losses, the number of victims. This is a major issue, a major problem, which is the focus of our attention, of course. Digitization offers great opportunities. In Bavaria, you know, we use the chances, but unfortunately, the criminals also use these chances, cashing in on them. That's why it's important that we effectively and consistently combat cybercrime. And this is really our key task, our target. There are various forms, of course, and today we talk about cyber trading. Cyber trading is certainly on the advance. It's a phenomenon of crime at the interface of cybercrime and economic crime or white-collar crime. So what is lurking behind this phenomenon? You know, the perpetrators lure the victims to online platforms, promising allegedly high profits, lucrative speculations, and so on with financial instruments. The platforms, at least to some extent, are primed so well, although they are fake, and very often victims just don't realize that they are not faced with a real platform, with a decent one. So actually many victims have been tricked out and deceived, and very often victims lose the complete capital employed. And the alleged brokers usually operate from call centers abroad, especially from eastern and southeastern countries. The brokers, these scammers, are really psychologically well trained. We've noticed that in a series of these phenomena, you know, top trained perpetrators. Only last week we had a press conference, you know, whether people are tricking others out with some promised marriages or grandchildren. They are always psychologically trained, conning their victims into handing over money, investing money, really not just a certain amount, a one-off amount, but recurrent amounts. And if they think, okay, the victim is squeezed out completely, the data are just passed on to other platforms so that they can squeeze more money out of their victims. Cyber trading is on the advance. Meanwhile, you know, with this phenomenon, the total loss is 250 million euros just in connection with the cases pending at ZZB. And predominantly we have to do with Bavarian cases. But the total loss in Germany alone runs into billions. So this is really a crime phenomenon where a lot of money is lost on the one hand, but with the criminals, you know, gained. A lot is gained. Up to 5 million euros in individual cases were lost. 5 million euros, and as I've said before, it's not a one-off loss very often, you know. So you have recurrent losses sometimes. All in all, at ZZB, proceedings against more than 900 platforms are pending. So it's not only about individual criminals or platforms. There are 900. The Bavarian judiciary cracks down on this form of crime. Not always, but very often these scammers are embedded in structures of organized crime groups, working in a digital, interconnected and cross-border manner. In Bavaria, we're well poised to counteract. We collaborate very well with the police. Thank you very much for your collaboration. I would also like to thank the staff of the judiciary, of course. And ZZB is the coordinator of high-profile cases, especially the Bavarian Central Office, as I said, for the prosecution of cybercrime, where these proceedings are bundled. We did this 3 years ago. ZZB, all in all, has 18 public prosecutors and 4 forensic IT specialists. When it was established, ZZB, not too long ago, they worked with 2 public prosecutors. Now we have 18. And this year, ZZB will be equipped with even more personnel. Now, the specialist investigators of ZZB support in difficult cases the public prosecutor's offices on site. When it comes to cybercrime, our spearhead is the ZZB in Bamberg. But each public prosecutors, the 22 public prosecutors in Bavaria, have one specialist IT department or an IT contact. So the normal cases, which are not quite as complex and elaborate, can be dealt with by the public prosecutors on site. But if the technical background is too complex or if countries abroad are involved, then you can always contact the ZZB. And in cyber trading, this happens relatively frequently. Now, on the perpetrator side, of course, international networking is observed, international collaboration. It's all the more important that the law enforcement authorities also collaborate closely on an international level. In 5 investigation complexes, so-called joint investigation teams have been established involving several countries, also including Spain, Italy, Sweden, Bulgaria, Serbia, Finland, Poland, among others. So it really pays off that our ZZB, right from its beginnings, has cooperated internationally and very closely with our partners, also including Interpol, Eurojust, and only thanks to this international collaboration we can be successful. A large number of proceedings were instituted. Perpetrators in Germany and abroad were arrested. Assets of crime running into millions were secured. 80 arrests in Germany and abroad. Searches or raids in Bulgaria, Albania, Georgia, Kosovo. In Bavaria, 10 people were sentenced and convicted because of commercial and gang crimes. They were sentenced to up to 6 years and 10 months, or 6 years and 10 months, and some cases have already been introduced to you. So I would like to thank Dr. Goldbeck and Public Prosecutor Gründler and their teams. I know they work painstakingly and meticulous. Fast success is not possible. You really have to get down to brass tacks, and everything that has to do with countries abroad is very time-consuming indeed. And our public prosecutors have really been extremely committed and when it comes to protecting our citizens and spotting perpetrators and investigating against them. Thank you very much for your work, and thank you very much to your colleagues on site for their excellent work. Since there are so many journalists here today, in this field, everyone can help. It's very good that you are here and that you can report about this. If profits are too high to be true, especially when the environment is a kind of low-interest environment, you should really take a very close look. You should be alerted, as it were, and alarmed. If there are unmatched profits promised, not a decent investment company or a bank would promise that. At least you should take a very careful look to see whether or not you have fallen victim to a scammer. And their approach is they're very good scammers. They're really capable of scamming in an excellent manner. They're really quite good at their work. So if profits are too high to be true, please take a second look and be very careful and report these scams and frauds to the police or the public prosecutor so that you don't lose too much money. And of course, the same applies to other cases as well. When it's about police officers, about digital worlds, always check whom can you trust. Trust in the digital work is very essential. And that's why if something sounds iffy to you, always ask questions. Your grandchildren, your neighbors, your kids, or the public authorities, be it the police or the judiciary, just to get more reliable information. Thank you very much for your interest, and thank you very much to the investors, and should you have or investigators, and should you have any questions, I'm happy to field them. Thank you very much, State Minister. Well, we have already had a Q&A session, as it were. Should you not have any other questions, and this is not the case, then I would like to thank all of you for your attention, and we're happy to field further questions.